Okay, the only thing standing between us and our early lunch is Vice Chair Brittany Cummins. Oh, no, I'm getting ahead of it. No, we've got two things. Okay, Charter School Task Force scope of work. I want to invite Debbie Davis up. That's what's next, right? While she's coming up, just background on this, the board approved to have this task force. What was agreed in all of that is that scope of work and recommendations for representation would come before the board for approval, and so that's what we're doing today. And so there's been a little evolution to this, and Debbie, can you update us? And
Yes, so Debbie Davis, I'm the Chief Audit Executive for the State Board of Education. It's great to be with you today. So the Charter School Task Force, what's happened with that, we put together a draft scope of work, and then so getting information, internal audit put it together. We requested feedback from the superintendency. We took it to audit committee, gave them kind of a look at it. They provided great feedback for us. And then once we had that feedback, we made some revisions. We also provided it to the State Charter School Board staff, and they provided it to their board. We received feedback from them. So we made some additional revisions as well. And so what you have attached to the agenda item is it's still a draft waiting for the approval of the board. But the Charter School Task Force, the thought also is there will be a facilitator that will help the task force. And once the facilitator is brought on board, the facilitator could also look at the scope of work and potentially suggest some different things that could be looked at. And then the task force itself could also look at the scope of work and consider if any amendments need to be made. Those would be brought back to the board for any changes. But currently what you have is a draft scope of work, and just seeking approval for that draft scope of work, recognizing that it could be amended in future.
And thank you for that work. It's a starting place, and we need to get started because the legislature and other parties are wanting to know what's going to come out of this task force, and we need to get these recommendations before the board. So with that, we've seen this, we've read it. Seeking a motion or any questions or comments. Vice Chair Brittany Cummins.
I move that we approve the Charter School Task Force scope of work.
Okay, we have.
Is it also representation?
What's that?
Or is it just
And
split?
participant list. Is that the question?
What's that?
And the participant list.
Okay, we have a motion. Oh, we have a second. Who was that? Laura?
No, it was Linda.
Oh, Linda. I thought maybe it was Board Member Newell. I've been trying to get in and I haven't looked up. Okay. Discussion to the motion. Board Member Scott Hansen.
I appreciate the work that's been done on the scope of work and the participant list. I am particularly pleased that we have a good list of deliverables for the committee or for the task force to bring to us. I'm wondering, though, about the timeline. We just have a from month to month in this right now. We've heard from Chair Huntsman that the legislature is putting some pressure on us to have this done by a certain time. Is there a time frame that we need to have in this scope of work?
Well, just so you can back this up a little bit, as this would come out before the board, and then the board's going to work on whatever it is. There'll be recommendations for certain legislative actions and that, and so we can probably get. I would hope that we have recommendations and we're accepting recommendations by our December board meeting. That's the ultimate. If we can do things a little quicker, that'd be great. But that's probably worst case scenario. Would you agree, Cindy?
So if I just jump in, I think part of the question was we weren't sure about when we could bring when we'd have the facilitator online. And then also, we have the participant list you'll see as categories, but we need to, of course, find specific individuals within those categories to serve. And so how long that process takes, I know it's in process. We're working on it. Deputy Scott Jones might be able to speak a little bit more to the facilitator if you'd like that information. But I think that's why we hadn't put hard dates in yet, but it could certainly be amended to include dates.
But on the participant list, the people have already I've been reaching out to if approved by the board, and then I'm not sure when the facilitator looking like coming on board. Deputy Superintendent Jones, is it close, or do you?
Deputy Superintendent of Operations Scott Jones, we're close. We have the paperwork all moving and flowing through. It's just a matter of contacting, and then when there's a group of them that we could pick from, it just becomes availability. Where the intent is to provide the board the final recommendations for their December meeting. It would involve a series of meetings, at least probably 2 to 3 in October and maybe 2 in November. That could be facilitated to reach that goal. So that's a generic timeline or a general timeline, but I think that's what Board Member Hansen's looking for. So we might be able to meet as early as the end of September for the first meeting. Again, though, it's not only the availability of the facilitator, but to Director Davis's point, it's availability of the members of the group as well. And so that's all being orchestrated right now. So.
Okay, do you have a follow-up?
Based on that discussion, I would move to amend the scope of work to include a timeline in the first section where it says from month to month, to say from September 2019 to December 2019, to clarify that that's when we expect this work to be done. Noting that this is still a document that's going to be revised potentially, and that will give them at least something to shoot for. So that would be my motion, is to
Is there a
amend
motion to
the
amend,
document.
to have that date? I have a motion and a second. Discussion to the proposed amendment. Board Member Belknap?
I guess my question is, are we handcuffing ourselves by saying December if it takes us into January? Or do we just have to get done? I'm just
And I was going to
concerned
speak to that too. I think in a sense that we kind of are. I think,
But it's okay.
no, we'll just have to come back and amend it. Our goal is to get this ASAP out. So we can, if it passes, if it passes and we're not done by December board meeting, then we'll have a proposed amendment. Vice Chair Brittany Cummins. Oh, Board Member Lear.
Yeah, I was a few people ago, but because I think maybe the issue is passed and it's not to this amendment. I have a different issue, but I think putting a timeline on it is a good thing. I think it moves the task force along. But the last two task forces I have been on, which this feels like another of the same complicated, complex, lots to discuss, have needed extra meetings. So be careful what you want to end. I would rather, having done this twice, I wish we would be more thorough than slow is fast. Somebody once said, some great person.
Slow is smooth, smooth is fast.
And I think that I wish we would have been more thorough in those two task forces, and I think this will prove the same. And so I hesitate at saying January or maybe a tentative timeline or something. But I have another comment after we're through Scott's motion.
Okay, after the proposed amendment.
Yes.
We're speaking to the proposed amendment. Board Member Janet Cannon.
I have the same concern that this is maybe a rushed timeline. My idea was to perhaps amend it to say from September to January or February. I know the legislature starts the end of January, and thinking it would be nice to have something prepared by then, but if we lapsed over into February, the legislature would still be going on, and we could still bring something forward. So I'll make an amendment to say that it goes from September to February. See how that?
You're amending the proposed amendment.
I'm amending that proposed amendment. Can I do
move it
that?
from December to
To February.
Is there a second? Not seeing a second. Okay, back to the original. No second. Back to the, there is a original amendment, and again, I want to speak against putting timelines on it. I just want to remind you of, I'm not sure if everyone's going to have a great experience serving on a task force. However, but there are opportunities in the task force, and they've been proven in the past that recommendations from the task force come before the board in a timely manner when they're ready. They don't have to be completed. The task force doesn't have to be finished, but recommendations can come early. And I believe in this case, with everything that's in the scope of work, that the task force can bring recommendations early to the board. But it's your call on this. We're still speaking to the amendment. Vice Chair Brittany Cummins, are you speaking to the amendment? I know Board Member Lear's in the queue for something else. Okay.
So I would like to speak in favor of the motion. I think topics that can be difficult to answer can get bogged down in a lot of conversation, and I think a deadline can be beneficial to all the task force members, recognizing that, okay, we may not agree, but we have to move forward. We can't just kind of stew in a place of disagreement, and I think sometimes that's a difficulty that task forces run into. And with a deadline, it says this is when your recommendations are expected. If the task force requests an extension, that's something that they can ask for based on a need, but I think having that deadline in place is beneficial to all, especially the facilitator who says, here's how we're going to plan the meetings, here's how we're going to time each meeting, et cetera. And so I think it can bring a benefit to the flow of the task force.
Board Member Linda Hansen, you speaking to the amendment?
Just a point of information. So you talked about participants. Are you, especially for the new members of the board, are you willing to have people volunteer, or do you already have that set in your mind?
I've asked one board member, but I haven't filled every seat. Board Member Lear, you're in the queue for outside the yeah, after the amendment. Not seeing any other discussion, so the proposed amendment is put a timeline to be completed by our December board meeting. Is that how I understand your amendment? Yes. Okay. Is there any further discussion on the proposed amendment? Seeing none, let's vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes. So we have an amended motion from the original. Board Member Lear.
I had wanted to talk about a couple of additions to the participant list that I thought were conspicuous by their absence. And I feel probably more strongly about one than the other, but the two areas that I thought were unrepresented, and this is, again, I see this as a different kind of task force where there's maybe a need for a couple of perspectives that have not always, well, one that always.
Are you speaking to your proposed amendment?
Yes.
Or do you have it? Would
My
you
amendment
put your
is that-
amendment on the table,
To
please?
add to the task force.
To add to the
participant
task
list.
force what?
Participant list.
What would you like to add?
I'd like to add a community member, and I'd like to add a teacher, either a charter school teacher or a traditional school teacher.
So your proposed amendment is to add a community member and a teacher.
Yes.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Want to speak to your motion? You kind of were, but now we'll get to it.
Yeah, I kind of was, you're right, thank you for stopping me. I know that there have been a number of community members, and often the task forces include a PTA appointee, which has been helpful in the past, and it's been helpful to see that perspective from outside the traditional public education community. But I think on this task force, it would be particularly beneficial to have a community member that has a particular interest or expertise or experience. And you can't have someone who's had an experience everywhere in the state with charter schools. But I know, for instance, in my district, there is a constituent who has had some very strong and very ongoing experiences with charter schools. I have no idea if the person would be interested, but it would offer a community perspective where this is something that does greatly affect the communities in a different way than some education issues. I also think the teacher is important because I think the teachers, I think we sometimes forget that both the funding for charter schools affects teachers, and also as the students come and go back and forth, that teachers are affected, and if that becomes an issue, then a teacher perspective would be helpful.
Okay. Speaking to the proposed amendment, Board Member Earl?
No, I've got another comment.
Okay, are you, okay, make sure we put you back in the queue. I'm gonna, yeah, so you turn it back on and I'll save it. Board Member Hanson, are you speaking to the proposed amendment? Hold it, hang on, there we go.
I actually would like to amend Carol's motion that we, the community member be the parent of a child in a charter school. Because a lot of people have different experiences with charter. I just feel like that those parents should have the opportunity to have a voice there.
Do I get to say yea or nay to that?
No, not yet.
Okay.
Is
Just
there a
checking.
second to the
Point of
proposed
information.
amendment? Second.
Good catch, Carol.
And you already kind of spoke to it. Did you speak enough to it? Okay. Board Member Lear, we're speaking to the proposed amendment.
I wasn't concerned about a parent of a charter school member. I was more concerned about a community member who's maybe a property owner who could be affected by a charter school's operations. That was more my focus. It wasn't, I think the parents could be an additional member that might add a different perspective, but my thought was it was a community member who had concerns and experience with the property related to charter schools, whether that's egress, ingress, whether it's a budding property owner, whether it's how a business has been affected. I just think that business community aspect is really important on this task force.
So the proposed amendment to the amendment is that the community member be a parent of a child that's in a charter school. Not seeing any other discussion. I've got Jenny's placeholder. Oh, I thought you want to speak to this? Oh, I thought it was a placeholder. Okay, it was, now it's not.
Thank you for, I
Okay.
appreciate you letting me speak for just a second. It is to this particular thing. I think it is important that it is a parent that's a representative on that as well, and not just a landholder kind of a thing. I think you're getting into kind of some specialized areas or whatever, of people that have very emotional based reasons for or why, for whatever reasons. Anyways, I think it should be a parent, so I'm speaking in favor.
Okay. And now your placeholders for something else, okay. So the proposed amendment to the amendment is under the community member, that community member be a parent of a child of a charter school. Speaking to that, Board Member Belknap?
Yes.
All right.
So my question is on adding members. So would that be speaking to are we going to replace, or are we going to make this task force ginormous?
The motion was to add.
Okay.
So, okay. Not seeing any other questions or comments, so we're going to vote on this, on the proposed amendment on the proposed amendment to the amendment is to, that the community member be a parent of a child of a charter school. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
No.
Will the ayes raise your hand? Board Member Scott Hansen, Board Member Mark Marsh, Board Member Linda Hansen, Board Member Mike Haynes, Board Member Sean Newell, Board Member Jennifer Gravett, Board Member Jenny Earl, Board Member Bolter, Vice Chair Brittany Cummins. The motion passes. Okay, so we have an amended motion. An amended motion is to add the 2 additional members, the community member, which happens to be a parent of a child, of a charter school, and also a teacher. That's the amended motion. Jenny, you're not speaking to the amended motion, are you? Okay. Not seeing any discussion, so all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
No.
Okay, with the ayes, raise your hand, be recognized. Board Member Mark Marsh, Board Member Linda Hansen, Board Member Mike Haynes, Board Member Sean Newell, Board Member Cannon, Board Member Earl, Board Member Gravett. Did I miss one?
That was Lear, not Earl.
Oh, Lear. Sorry. Usually she's sitting right there. This is all getting me off. Okay, and Vice Chair Brittany Cummins.
Let's make sure I got Marsh, Linda Hansen, Haynes, Newell, Lear, and Cummins, right?
4, no. Cannon, you get Cannon, Lear, Gravett. Vice Chair Brittany Cummins. So the motion passes. So now we have before us, the motion before the board is to approve the amended scope and the amended participation. So, all right, we're still speaking to all those amended things. Board Member Jenny Earl.
Yes, I would like to remove, my amendment is to remove under 2, Scope B, the 417 prohibiting LEAs and third-party providers from offering incentives or disbursement or enrollment or participation. Seems like we just did this as a board. We just exhausted this one, having this come through. So I don't know, maybe there's other reasons that I've missed, but we just, as a board, had this as a rule come through recently. And previous to that, there was quite a bit of discussion. So that's mine. All right, I guess I need a second. Sorry, I always do that.
So you want to remove?
I want to remove it, yeah.
2.
In order that they can focus on the things that are, the rest of the things that are in there, so that we're not getting sidetracked on things we've already decided as a board recently. So it's
2B.
B, yeah, the
Okay.
417, R207, 7,
Do we
417.
have a second to remove from the scope 2B? We have a second, and you spoke to it. Hang on.
Yeah, okay, we need clarification, Chair, if that's okay. You say 2B, or is it B, paragraph B2?
It's, well, I don't know. I don't have a line here. Is there, under the scope of work, it would be 2.
Under A.
Or so
Oh, 2,
A.
okay.
Okay,
A,
sorry,
2B.
1A, 2B.
Right, okay.
1A.
1A, 2B.
1A, 2B.
Got it.
1A, 2B.
Thank you.
Oh, good question. Well, except
Okay,
there's
and the
nothing
second
good.
still good?
Yeah.
Okay, discussion. Are you going to discuss, are you,
I had something else entirely, but I also have a point to this.
Board Member Lear?
As I read that, it says, potentially including R277. I don't see that as an exhaustive or a exclusive list. So I guess I don't see the need to remove any of those examples. Am I reading that accurately?
Well, the scope of work is not going to speak to
It says potentially
1A,
including.
2B.
But it says potentially including, so we want it taken completely out of the
Completely out of the
discussion.
discussion.
Okay. Then I do not favor that. I
Okay.
think it should be left to the task
All right.
force to see where those kinds of discussions go.
Board Member Bolter.
I'm also, I'm in support of that. I just want to remind the board that last year when we went down this road, we were called before the Senate Rules Committee and pretty much slapped on the wrist for doing this very thing. So I don't understand why we're circling back around to it again. I-
Sued.
And I understand that there's other reasons for this, but I don't know. That's just my caution.
Okay. Vice Chair Brittany Cummins.
I see this option. So when we got called before the Rules Committee, it wasn't a slap on the wrist. It was a recognition. It was a recognition of our rules in line with statute, and that's what the Rules Committee's job is and what their responsibility is are we being constitutional in our rulemaking authority? And so I think the question still lies is our rule clear, and are there confusions among charter schools as to how to apply that rule? And I think it's an important question to answer. While the recommendations from the task force may not be a rule, but is our 277417 clear? And if it's not clear and fully understood by all the members of that body, what recommended changes might they have, not just to rule, but to statute, if they find that this is still a confusing topic? If it's not, it'll be like 5 minutes of, nope, we're good, and it'll move on. And so I think it's just, is there still some confusion and clarification that's necessary? And based on some calls that come from charter schools, I think there is still a little bit of confusion on what that rule means and how it should be applied. So
And that's why, and if I'm going to speak against the proposed amendment, because those discussions are happening, and they're going to the charter board, they're coming to us. There's still some confusion on that particular topic of how far they can go, and so if there's a proposed change or a betterment, let's get it out of the task force that the charter community and USBE is good with and stays within the law. But could be a short conversation or an easy conversation. But it was one that was inventoried and as a concern and something that needs to have more clarity. So the proposed amendment is to delete from the scope of work 1A, 2B. Any other discussion to the proposed amendment? Seeing none, let's vote. This is to remove 1A, 2B. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
No.
For the ayes? We have the two. Okay. Proposed amendment. Okay, we're back to the amended scope and the amended list of participants. Is there any other proposed? Board Member Lear.
I had one more issue, and I'm not sure if this doesn't go to the participant list, maybe goes to the scope of work, but I've had a number of people in request that at least one of these meetings be an open meeting of the task force's discussion. I know that's, again, not typical. I know there are reasons that task forces like to be closed, but I think because this affects communities, this affects property owners, this affects businesses, I think at least one of these meetings should be an open discussion, an open meeting, and I don't know where that fits into this scope of work, but I'd like to make that
So
proposal.
your proposed motion is to have one of these meetings be an open meeting.
Yes, so that the
Is there a
public
second?
can attend and be transparent.
Do I have a motion and a second? And you kind of spoke to it. You want to speak more?
Yes, sorry, I keep forgetting
fine.
that.
We're good.
I think it is, we need to do this in the daylight. We need to do this so that our community, our business owners know that the school board is aware of that charter schools do very good things for the community, but there are also some things that are challenges, and I think they should be able to weigh in on this kind of a discussion when money is at stake.
Vice Chair Brittany Cummins.
I support the motion, but just not the background behind it. So I agree that there is an opportunity that this task force could take to have one of their meetings open and to receive some information or comment. I do, however, want to clarify that this task force was not ever established to be an evaluation of the pros and cons of charter schools or their impact or their non-impact on a community. This task force is very specifically asked to resolve some concerns that have come up with charter school law and charter school rule, and how we can correct some of those issues that, as you know, this program began in one place, and now how do we resolve the concerns that have come up in clarifying statute and rule and law. And so I just want to make sure that we're all aware that we're not evaluating charter schools, their impact on communities or et cetera, but just really trying to resolve concerns with a wide stakeholder group with their input on that.
And one of the challenges with this particular motion is to have one. The most appropriate one would be probably the first one, because the intent of this, and that's why they're closed, is so that people will be very open, blunt and bold, and whatever their concerns are, and what the issues are, and act in a timely manner. And if people are really guarded in a public meeting, it's an opportunity for grandstanding, and it's also not an opportunity for people to move their best work forward to play to the public. And I also want to remind that everyone that the recommendations that come from this task force will be served up to this board in an open meeting. And then everything is open from then moving forward to whatever direction and whatever you're going to go. And so in the past, these meetings have been closed because of the sensitive nature, and then also to move quickly in a timely manner of what these issues are and have people speak openly about it. And so we're not violating any laws. I know the media, and I know there are other people, there's other stakeholders who want to get in and get into the meeting and have an influence. And I'm not sure if the best time is while the recommendations are being, I'm not sure what point in the whole process of discovery, of rolling your sleeves up and getting your work done and fine-tune at the end, where having a public meeting would best serve. And I'm just speaking from the experience of probably our last two task force. Well, I've been on, I think, 3, but that have been that way. So I throw caution that way. Board Member Scott Hansen.
I'll echo what Chair Huntsman just said. I'll speak against this. I have an open meeting as part of the task force for reasons of expediency. Also, we have a great list, I think, of participants in the task force that could represent many different points of view. Also, there's some special challenges that we presented to the task force facilitator in opening it up to a public meeting that may not be their forte to abide by all the laws that they need to have a public meeting. And this will all see the light of day when it comes in front of the board. I think that's an opportunity for everyone to have a say before we vote on anything and finalize it.
Okay, the motion before the board, the amendment before the board is that one of the meetings be a open meeting. Board Member Lear.
I had one more comment, and it's specifically as it relates to Board Member Hansen's and Cummins' comments. I'm not proposing that this be a public hearing. I'm proposing that the public be able to hear the discussion the task force has. I think we just had a really excellent example in the school fees task force, whereas if there'd been the public observing the discussion that the task force members then could have received, a whole range of concerns and issues that the task force members were missing. And that's what I was thinking. Wasn't thinking this would be a free-for-all. Wasn't thinking anybody, y'all come, y'all speak. It was more of the task force operates, showing that it is carefully, thoughtfully discussing the concerns, not the pros and cons, but the concerns and the challenges sometimes of charter school management and charter school building and all those kinds of things. So I wasn't anticipating a hearing, was anticipating do your work in public. I think we've seen a lot of news about lots of public entities that have done their work behind closed doors, and it hasn't been very well respected, and it hasn't always been as thorough as it could have been if the public could have viewed the work that was being done on just one occasion.
Board Member Belknap.
Thank you, Chair. I just have to take a minute and I'm going to use the words of Carol that sometimes this hard work is messy. And the school fees task force was hard, it was long. It came out recommendations from that to the public. The public had voice after voice after voice after voice. But I believe that during that task force, we would have been, if someone would have come in the middle and not seen the whole layout, that a lot of misinformation would have been fed out that wasn't going to be an end result. And so I'm going to speak against this motion only because misinformation goes out when you're not, until it's all gathered.
Okay, the proposed amendment is that the task force meeting have one open meeting. Not seeing any discussion, let's vote on that proposed amendment. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
No.
With the ayes, raise your hand. Board Member Cindy Davis, Board Member Lear, Board Member Gravitt, Board Member Jenny Earl, Board Member Bolter, Vice Chair Brittany Cummins. That's 6. The proposed amendment does not pass. So we're back to our amended motion. But I think I can just read it without it being all typed out. Which is the proposed motion is that we approve the amended draft charter school task force scope of work and also the amended draft charter school task force participants. Not seeing any discussion, let's vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? No. We have 1 no, 2 no, 1. Board Member Bolter. Okay, motion passes. Okay, we're moving